The Colorado Avalanche are a wagon. Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl aren't working together for the Oilers. And who isn't in a playoff spot, but will be when the regular season's over?
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL. I am Nick Zararis, the host of Locked On Oilers. That is Hunter Hodies. He is one of the hosts of Locked On Penguins, and we want to thank everyone that is making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. A whole lot to get to today, friends. So to start out, we're going to glaze the Avalanche for about 8.5 minutes because they're off to one of the great regular season starts we've ever seen, some of the most dominant 5-on-5 numbers imaginable. Our second segment, we'll pivot to something I had talked about earlier in the week on Locked On Oilers that I think the national audience should know. The Oilers are predicated on Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl being their get-out-of-jail-free card when they're losing games. And right now, they're not winning those minutes at all. And then to wrap up, we're going to talk about that cohort of teams, the bottom 8 in both conferences, and who's got a good chance of making the playoffs, even though they're sitting on the outside looking in right now. So to start out, Hunter, before we get to the numbers, which are preposterous, the first thing I wanted to talk about in regards to Colorado, we said this a few weeks ago. I give a lot of kudos to that group, that leadership group, looking around and saying, we are burning daylight here. We have MacKinnon and Makar in the primes of their lives. We can't just waste this. And last year, they did the wholesale change of their goalie room. They looked at Casey Middlestad and said, that's not a 2C on a cup winner. We need to upgrade there. And they went out and they got Brock Nelson. They paid a pretty penny for Brock Nelson, but all is working very well for them right now. And I dare say a lot more teams would benefit from looking at their situations a bit more objectively. You know, Colorado won a couple years ago. They could have looked at their group and said, we're happy with where we are. We think we're right there. Colorado said that's not good enough. I wish more teams had that mindset.
Right, Nick, and you didn't even bring up they had the whole Mikko Rantanen situation. They said, we're not going to pay you all that money. We're going to move you. And then obviously he got traded back into the division, but they made a pretty big gamble there. And you look at where they're at now, one regulation loss 2 months into the season. Nick, it doesn't even feel real, but they're dominating teams on a nightly basis. It doesn't even matter which line is on the ice. But if you want to discuss, the MacKinnon line with Necas and MacKinnon, 58.7 expected goals for rate at 5-on-5. They have played 300 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time. That line is just decimating the opposing teams. It doesn't matter who they're playing against. Nathan MacKinnon, Nick, if the Hart Trophy were handed out today, he would win it in a landslide. I think it would probably be unanimous if you ask me. 22 goals, 46 points in 26 games. Marty Necas in signing that extension, he has also been ridiculous. Cale Makar is over a point per game. Terry Lekkonen's basically at a point per game. But another big reason that I don't think is being talked about enough, they have Gabe Landeskog healthy. And when you have your leader like that back in your locker room, I really do think that can change part of the complexity of the team. It's not the only reason, Nick, but you can see how much the rest of these guys, they are feeding off him being back and being healthy. It helps change the complexity of your team. And when you have him humming the way he is, and you combine that with the way their stars are playing and the way their depth is playing, you have a juggernaut. Right now in the Western Conference, I don't know who is going to beat this team 4 out of 7 times with the way that MacKinnon and company are going. You look at some of the 5-on-5 metrics, Nick, and we're going to get into those in a couple of seconds. It's insane. Like, they are just kicking every team's ass up and down the ice every single period. It is a joy to watch.
So let me start to get into this. They have outscored opponents 76-37 at 5-on-5. They have 2/3 of the goals in their games. 2/3. The only sample I can compare that to was a couple years ago. Vegas won the Stanley Cup. They outscored their opponents 2-1, 66-33 on the road to winning their cup. On 11.16 shooting, 4th in the league. So you would expect the PDO side of this to cool off a little bit. The 928 save at 5-on-5 is great too. That's top 5 as well. They're 21% of their scoring chances every game are high danger. That's pretty good. Yeah. If 1 out of every 5 chances you create is a high danger chance, that something's telling me it's going to work. And that the beautiful thing about Colorado, and why we know this isn't as fugazi as, say, the Canucks a couple years ago, or maybe the Capitals a couple years ago. Even when their PDO does come down, they're still at 56, 57% on the high dangers and the expected goals. So sure, the shooting will come down closer to 10. The save percentage will come down a little bit closer, 920, 915. Sure, they're still going to be 55% of the goal share. If the metrics come down 10%, they are afforded 20% cushion on where they are at right now in terms of their actual goals. And then as far as MacKinnon, they're doing it 38% of the time against the other team's first line. They get the hardest workload, and they are kicking ass, as you said. They are not beating up on the bad opponents. And then the other thing about Colorado that I wanted to talk about in regards to MacKinnon, 93rd percentile for top skate speed, and then 98th percentile for distance covered per game. That dude is moving as fast as humanly possible, and he is everywhere. And it helps when your best player has both the mentality of I'm going to kick your ass, and then they have the capacity to just go out there and do it. There are a lot of really good players in this league who don't have the mindset to play that way, or they don't have the physical ability. MacKinnon is one of the rare few who, I know he's not the captain, Landeskog's the captain, but if things are going wrong in a game, and I know they haven't gone wrong that much this year so far for them, he can climb over the wall and say, okay, time to go to work. I got to get this done. And I know we talk about this anytime we talk about MacKinnon, but I think the most telling clip that lives in my brain is from that Winter Classic / Stadium Series at Lake Tahoe, where Pietrangelo looked up, saw MacKinnon skating at him at full speed, and all he said was, oh boy, because there's nothing you can do. He's
right. I mean, when he gets rolling like that, there is nothing I don't think anyone can do to stop him.
Because he's so honestly, big, Nick, too.
Like, ever since they won the cup, you've seen their playoff results since then. A little underwhelming, and that happens for cup winners sometimes. But
you have a brain drain. You lost guys. It happens.
Right, exactly. And I think this year, it's like, the Michael Jordan meme, and I took that personally. He saw what happened at the end, especially this past season, where they lost that really hard-fought series to the Dallas Stars. And he's like, bet, I'm going to go out here, and I'm going to kick everyone's ass this year. He is a man on a mission right now. That entire team is, honestly. And the scary part is, Nick, they're probably going to get better in the next few months, too. That Colorado front office is going to go all in when they have these guys in the prime of their careers. I think they're going to be aggressive at the trade deadline, and they should be.
It paid dividends for them last year. I know they didn't ultimately, as you said, get past the first round, but they reorganized their team on the fly last year. They changed out both goalies. They brought in Brock Nelson. They made their team a little bit deeper by turning Rantanen into Jack Drury and Marty Necas. Necas has fit in really well playing with MacKinnon. 2 strong puck carriers, guys who can generate zone entries on their own, both big, both strong, both very fast skaters. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on in this segment before we move on, take our first break, because we are going to talk about McDavid in the next segment. You're starting to see people launch the take, Hunter. The take is starting to be launched that MacKinnon is the best player in the world. And right now, you would be hard pressed to make the argument based on how this particular season is going. If you want to go on track record,
yes.
Yeah, so far, I think it's not even really much of an argument. McDavid is having a really rough go of it at 5-on-5. I think some of it's lineup, and we'll talk about it in our next segment so I don't get too far ahead of myself, but you might be watching the changing of the guard. And I know Nathan MacKinnon's a year older than Connor McDavid, so it's funny to say that, but MacKinnon took a little while to become this dominant of a player, whereas McDavid, by the time he was 19, he won his first Hart Trophy. So just something to get on your radar.
Right. I agree. I think right now there's not a better player for the first 2 months of the season than Nathan MacKinnon. Again, if we were to vote on the Hart Trophy right now, he would get it unanimously. I don't know why anyone would vote for anyone else. And you were right, Nick. Like, it took him a few seasons, MacKinnon, that is, to really get into, that 90 to 100 point range. He had that 140 point season just a couple of years ago where, during that season, you could make an argument that he was the best player in the world that year, the way he played. Last year, he was at 116. This year, Nick, I think he's probably going to be right around there again, maybe 120 to 125-ish points if he keeps this up. So again, the way that his line continues to roll, the way that forward group continues to roll, I just don't know who is beating this team as of right now 4 out of 7 times in the playoffs. It doesn't matter, how healthy everyone else is. I still think when all these teams are healthy in the West, Colorado is the best team right now, and I think they're going to get better. The process is there. Even when their PDO comes down a little bit, the process is still going to be there, and I think they're still going to be finishing a good chunk of their chances because of the way they keep dominating teams at 5-on-5. So it's been a dream start from them, and I'm excited to see, if they can really keep up this historic start. And again, Nick, one regulation loss 2 months into the season. That's unheard of.
They're on pace for something like 142 standings points right now, which obviously isn't going to happen, but just ludicrous to think about. We're going to take our first break on today's edition of Locked On NHL. When we come back, we're going to dive into what's wrong with the Edmonton Oilers and why Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl aren't the get-out-of-jail-free card they used to be. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly, everything's different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is the best when the game starts to change. A receiver gets hot, defenses tighten up, or a momentum-swinging turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. With live spreads and money lines that adjust play-by-play, player props that adjust as the game develops, you can bet on individual props like next touchdown score, the results of a drive, game totals, and so much more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. Tonight, really important game in the NFC playoff picture. The Cowboys going up to Detroit. The Cowboys 3.5-point underdogs. That line's moving in Detroit's favor. If you're interested, you might want to make a move. And if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your live NFL bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you so much to everyone who's making Locked On NHL their first listen of the day. Locked On NHL is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we've got your team covered every single day. Locked On is the #1 sports podcast network. Okay, Hunter, my friend, we know something is wrong with the Oilers. Just vibes-wise, eye test-wise, underlying metrics-wise, coaching-wise, everything is falling apart for them.
Goaltending-wise?
Goaltending's implied. We're talking about the Oilers. The Oilers haven't had a good goalie basically in my entire conscious memory, sans the one Dwayne Rollison season like 20-odd years ago. But when we talk about the Oilers, we talk about McDavid, Draisaitl. That has generally been the get-out-of-jail-free card. When you're down in a game, you're struggling, you can't score, they get called upon to win you those minutes. They are supposed to be, we are down in this game, we need a goal. Case in point, you saw them earlier in the week against Minnesota. Minnesota scored relatively early in that game. Jonas Brodin 1-0. The Oilers effectively spent 25 of the 60 minutes of this game at regulation with McDavid and Draisaitl together. They couldn't get a goal on the board. And after the game, naturally, I was curious and I went and looked. So far this year, in the 100-ish minutes they have played together at 5-on-5, and that's not the default. They don't play together all of the time. They are dead even. They have scored 9 goals, and opponents have scored 9 goals. The other more glaring issue to amplify how important it is they get on track, the depth, the non-McDavid Draisaitl minutes. The Oilers have been outscored 33-13. 28%. They have a 28% goal share in the non-McDavid Draisaitl minutes. And this is multifaceted. Think about it like this. If you play Connor and Leon together, none of the other forward groups have zone entries because those are the only 2 Oiler forwards who can generate zone entries on their own, especially with Roslovic out, dealing with that upper body injury. He's going to be out for a while, too. The Oilers don't have a lot of foot speed. They don't have guys who are going to carry the puck in. So it's a lot of dump and chase. And their best puck-moving defenseman, Evan Bouchard, generally is going to play with McDavid and Draisaitl. So you're asking Darnell Nurse, Alec Regula, Brett Kulak, Ty Emberson. None of those guys is a particularly adept puck mover, with Jake Wallman out with an injury as well. So you are asking the rest of your lineup not to get killed. They're getting killed. And you're begging Connor and Leon to do things. And they're not playing terribly. They're just not getting the same bounces they usually do. And their goaltending has been really bad in their minutes. When you combine all of those factors together, you are looking at a team that is not working. This roster was assembled to execute in a certain way, and pretty much none of it is working.
It's funny. That reminds me of a very distinct Penguins team towards, the mid 2000s, I would say, the 2014-15 Penguins. It sounds exactly like that, Nick, where if it wasn't Crosby and Malkin generating the offense, wasn't much else going on. Just when you look at the rest of those teams, the depth wasn't there. Obviously, that changed once Jim Rutherford came in, and he went on that 18-month heater with filling out the bottom six and stuff and getting everything right. But for a while there, Penguins just didn't have any depth to help out. And when Crosby and Malkin were getting shut down, which was happening, they couldn't generate offense at all. And I think you're seeing the same similarities right now with the Oilers. Even when they try to put McDavid and Leon together, it's not working because teams can throw out their best against that line, and then for the other players in the Oilers, it's easier for those teams to defend because they're not going up against Connor and Leon every shift. They're not going up against Evan Bouchard, who was going to get those minutes with McDavid and Draisaitl. And Nick, and I saw you put your tweet out earlier this week. It was 50% this year so far. Last year it was 63. The year before that, it was 64% with Connor and Leon on the ice at the same time. And I feel like they only really want to do that when they're down in games. Yeah. When they're down 2 to 3 goals, I think Knoblauch has really no choice but to put those two together because you're chasing the game. If you're tied or if you're leading, you can afford yourself to have them on separate lines. But you stack them together because you're trying to push back. And yeah, does that mean some of your other lines don't get as many minutes? Yes, but you obviously want your best players on the ice as much as possible. But that still allows the other team to really key in on those matchups and make sure that they can have their top defensive players out there against Connor and Leon that can at least do a bit. I also think this has something to do with Stan Bowman not doing a good enough job this offseason, Nick, filling out the team. I felt like he could have been a bit better filling out the forward depth after the amount of forwards they lost over the offseason. I know right now they don't have a lot of cap space, so it's going to be a bit difficult to really fix that during the season, but I do think part of that falls on Stan Bowman. So when you combine all of that, their defensive issues, which are very glaring, they're not playing well in their own zone, and Nick, you combine the goaltending situation because Cal Pickard is unplayable and Stuart Skinner, I think we reached a point where he at least needs a change of scenery. You have a team that they need to figure it out. Otherwise, they're going to be left in the dust. And I know we've said that the past couple of seasons, Nick, and they have gone on long winning streaks, but something about it this year just feels a little bit different, doesn't it?
The underlying numbers are not there. In years past, the last 2 years, they've gotten off to these slow starts. They've still been mid-50s in expected goals and high danger chances. They're league average in pretty much every metric. They're 15th, 17th, 18th. And you combine that with, and you alluded to this, but I just want to give you some context. So Corey Perry scored 19 goals last year. Jeff Skinner scored 16. Victor Arvidsson scored 15. That's 50 goals that went out the door. And then you had Connor Brown's 10, and you can assume Evander Kane would have given them 10 to 15 in the regular season. You're talking about 70 to 80 goals that walked out the door over the summer that you were attempting to replace with Trent Frederick, who averages 10 to 13 goals. He has 1 so far this year. Mangiapane, who can probably give you 10 or so. And then Matthew Savoy and Ike Howard. That was your recipe. And Roslovic, I'll give Stan Bowman credit. Roslovic was playing really well. He was on pace for almost 70 points, but he got hurt. And they do not have the depth. They haven't recalled Ike Howard. They want him to keep playing down in the A because he's getting 17, 18 minutes a game down there, and it's more pertinent for his long-term trajectory. But right now, the depth is not there. The Stars are playing well. Draisaitl's got 31 and 27. McDavid's got 37. It doesn't matter. They're not winning. They're putting up good stats on a bad team. And unlike in years past, there isn't another level for them to get to. It's not like they're waiting for them to get going. McDavid started slow each of the last 2 years and kind of got going. He's still at over a point per game and playing well. The wing support hasn't been there for him. Ditto for Draisaitl. They're not scoring enough. Their defense isn't good enough to be the driving force of a team, especially with no Wallman. And their goaltending is an atrocity, especially they have the worst 5. They have a bottom 5 save percentage at 5-on-5, and that's killing them. Yeah. They're not playing terrible hockey, but they are a team that is waiting around for something to go wrong. And more often than not, something is going wrong.
Right. And just a few more underlying metrics, Nick, before we close out the segment here. I was on Money Puck before the show just doing some prep. Nick, at 5-on-5 in actual goals, they have a 42.7% actual goal rate this year at 5-on-5. That is 31st in the league, Nick. Only above Nashville. And we all know how bad Nashville has been this year. Let's be real. I mean, they're going to be selling off their players pretty soon. Ryan O'Reilly could be fetching a bunch. But They're 31st in actual goals, 42.7% goal rate. Expected goals, they're 24th with 48.2%. Their shot attempts, 50.7. So that's okay. But again, Nick, when you're 31 out of 32 teams and your actual goals compared to expected goals at 5-on-5 this season, just too much is going wrong so far. And they don't have a lot of time to really turn this around. I mean, they have the potential because we've seen it these last couple of years, but still something just feels a little bit off. I don't want to fully bet against them because Connor and Leon can do superhuman things. I mean, these two have literally dragged this team to 2 straight Stanley Cup finals. So it would not stun me in the slightest if this team was still able to make the playoffs. Hell, I kind of still expect it just because of the way that they play. But a lot of this team just feels different compared to the last couple of years, even when they've turned it around.
One last thing on this note before we move along. They don't have cards to play. They have no cap space, and the deadline is 2.5 months away. If you want to bring Pete DeBoer in, sure. I don't know how much that's really going to change the situation at hand. They're not deep enough, and their star players can only do so much. We're going to take our second and final break real quick, and then when we come back, we'll talk about teams that aren't in playoff spots that we think probably will when the season is over. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, my energy, and my mood. That's why I've been using Drip Drop. It is doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands, using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. I've been trying to get ahead on my New Year's resolution, something I do to kind of be self-important. I like to start them in December. One of the things I've been trying to do is streamline my morning routine, making getting out of bed easier. One of the things I've been doing is 8 to 12 ounces of water, adding a packet of Drip Drop to the flavor, shake it up, sit, don't use my phone, skim a book, pick up something physical that is not my phone to be more focused. Hydration has always been a non-negotiable for me. Drip Drop helps me feel even better. And right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners like you 20% off their first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. One more time, that's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up now for that winter bulk. You will thank me later. Keep your mind and body performing at their best with Drip Drop. Thank you so much to everyone that is hanging out on this Thursday edition of Locked On NHL with Hunter and I. And Hunter, we've been talking about it for a month now that the standings are very compressed and there's going to start to become separation. The Flames and Predators are very happily they're happily voting themselves off the island. They know their season is over already and it's only December. So we'll start with the East. Right now, the bubble I would classify as the Islanders, the Red Wings, the Rangers, the Bruins, and then below them are Columbus, Toronto, Buffalo, and Florida. The mighty Florida Panthers are in dead last, and they're dealing with injuries. Matthew Tkachuk is starting to tease his eventual return, which is nice, but they are underperforming. They are injured to all hell. Starting this conversation, coming into the year, you would have said Toronto and Florida were expected to make the playoffs, that It would be a disappointment if they didn't. Columbus, the Rangers, they were on the bubble where if things went right for them, you could see them getting in. For the Islanders, for the Bruins, for the Sabres, we didn't expect a lot from them. The Islanders are fun. I don't think they're particularly good. The Bruins were overplaying their talent for quite a while, but are starting to come back to earth. And the Sabres are just cursed. I don't have an explanation for what's wrong with the Buffalo Sabres. So of that 8, what 2 teams do you feel the strongest about going forward and turning their fortune around?
Number 1 is Florida. I know they're in dead last, Nick, and I tweeted about this earlier this week. I was like, when are they going to start getting serious here? They've been kind of messing around with everyone the first 2 months. They're kind of hanging in there. Wild card wise, they're 6 points back of the Penguins right now. Atlantic wise, they're 5 points out of third, which is held by the Ottawa Senators. But I've kind of been wondering, when are you going to start messing around and start going on a big winning streak here? I know they are very decimated. Bob Nick has not been as good this year, but I do think eventually this team is going to turn it around and they are going to make the playoffs. I would be stunned if they were not in a playoff spot by the end of the year. Second, in these bottom 8 teams, maybe Columbus if they get healthy. The Islanders, they're fun. Schaefer has been a blast this year. I don't trust the Red Wings. The Rangers, I don't really think are very good. The Bruins are very weird.
They're frisky. I'll give them that. They hang around.
Yeah. I honestly might go Columbus because I think offensively they have a lot of potential. And if they can stay healthy and get good quality goaltending, I think they can make a little bit of noise. So I would go with those two teams that have the best chance. Hell, Nick, you didn't even bring up Pittsburgh, who is still in the final playoff spot right now. They've won 3 of their last 4 games. Schedule in December is going to be hell on earth for them, but they pass a Thanksgiving benchmark. They're going to start getting some guys back. I think they're going to make this interesting for the rest of the season. I still don't know if they're going to get in yet, but they're going to make it hard on some of these teams that are below them to pass them. I'll say that. As for the West, I'll still go Edmonton, even though it feels a little different this year. I don't want to fully bet against Connor and Leon. Other than that,
it's Winnipeg. A really rough
I guess I'll go Winnipeg once they get Hellebuck back. But even then, Nick, they have not been good since their fast start.
They're a one-line team.
Yeah, they are playing really poorly, not good enough defensively since Hellebuck has gone down. The goaltending hasn't been good enough. Offensively, as you mentioned, they have also not been good enough. They had that really great start too, where it's like, okay, maybe they're going to do what they did last year, for example. And then once Hellebuck got hurt and once they got away from that fast start, not much sense. So if I had to pick 2 from the West, Nick, it would be Edmonton, I guess, and Winnipeg. But both those teams right now are up a creek. Hell, San Jose's in the final playoff spot right now. Didn't see that coming at the start of the year.
It's been a very weird start to the year where you do have outlier situations where the Blackhawks and the Sharks are vying for that spot like it's 2017. But as for the West, and I'll give you my East too, I'm with you on Florida. I would be shocked if they don't get, especially with how compressed everything is. It's only going to take 4 or 5 wins in a row to get right back into a playoff spot. As they get healthier, you hope Bob comes around. As for the other one in the East, I would say Columbus probably has the highest opportunity out of that group. I would like to say the Rangers, but they just don't score enough in spite of everything else that's gone well for them. So I would be in agreement with you there. I think Toronto's dead. I know we didn't really talk about them in those minutes, but I just don't think they have the guys. They don't. Berube's kind of out of cards to play. He's reconfigured the lineup.
Their offensive metrics are just really
dreadful.
Poor,
and their defense is awful.
And also, Nick, I've watched some of their games even outside of them blowing the doors off the Penguins this past weekend. They're not fun to watch. It's a hard watch up there. And I know that might offend some people that listen to our show from the Toronto area, but they just don't have the horses, man.
No, they're a very top-heavy team, and you can only ask those guys to do so much. And then in the West, I think I'm with you on Edmonton. I think they're a wild card team at best, though. I think you will start to see the teams ahead of them in the Pacific pull away. And then I want it to be Utah, but I feel like it's probably going to be Winnipeg because Chicago is a nice story, but it's really just Spencer Knight, Vlasic, and Connor Bedard. Nazar's having moments here and there, but it's a 4-person team. I would like it to be Chicago. I don't think it will be. Utah got off to the great start, but has cooled off immensely. Winnipeg is dealing with a lot of injuries. I think they're coming to terms with the fact Jonathan Toews is not a second-line center, which the sooner they do, the better. He is completely overmatched in those minutes. St. Louis feels dead. I saw them play the Devils last week. That was a really ugly hockey game with a lot of scoring chances, and that's the antithesis of what the Blues are trying to be. The Blues are supposed to be a low-event, tight forechecking team, and that game was wide open. Vancouver is a 3-forward team in Quinn Hughes. Ademko got off to a great start, and then Nashville and Calgary, I think, are just entirely out of the mix. So I think we're going to have a very process of elimination season here where it's going to be pretty academic. You're going to see teams in that mushy middle continue to beat up on each other. The good teams, the genuinely good teams, will take turns beating them. And it's going to be a lot like the last 2 years for those 2 wildcard spots where maybe we do have a team that only has 90, 91 standings points making that last spot because everyone's taking turns beating each other. There isn't a lot of separation between Florida, who's in dead last, and that last wildcard spot. So, like I said, it's going to take one good week for any of these teams to get back in the mix. Hell, the Rangers were in dead last a week ago. Now they're two game wins back of the last wild card. It's not going to take a lot. It really isn't.
No, I agree. And even Nick, we'd even discuss Philadelphia. They're 15-8-3. They're 3rd place in the Metro. I still don't know what to think of the Flyers. They play fine defensively. but they don't get a lot of offense, which, hey, shocker, Rick Tocchet team doesn't generate as many offensive opportunities. Dan Vladar, their goaltender, has been very good this year. Trevor Zegras has been really good, but are they going to be able to sustain this for a full season? You look at their 15 wins, Nick. They only have 8 regulation wins. Like, they're living and dying a lot with their past regulation results with overtime and shootouts. Is that going to change moving forward? That's something to watch. Carolina, we all expect. New Jersey, they've fallen off a little bit just because Jack is not healthy right now. Washington,
I watched them last night against Dallas. That was a rough game, man.
Yeah.
The Devils just look dead. And Dallas is good, don't get me wrong, but without Jack, they are in a really rough spot. The stats they had, I want to say they're scoring 1.6 goals per game at 5-on-5 with Jack Hughes out of the lineup. He's a top 10, 15 player in the world. You lose that for any extended period of time, you're going to have a tough time. It just straight up.
I agree. And hell, Washington, Nick, they were at the bottom of the standings to start the year. They're now first in the Metro. That's a playoff team. They're playing really well. Their metrics are good. I still though, for me, how do you match up against some of the big dogs in the conference?
For a lot of these teams, we don't have to worry about that, Hunter.
That's fair.
We have a very clear pecking order this year. We have the really good teams. We have 80% of the league is mediocre, and then the last 10% are the bad teams.
Yeah.
And it's going to make the season interesting because that big middle is going to take turns beating each other. And it does, in effect, give Gary what he wants, a league full of parity. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On NHL, where we are hoping that an Olympic rink that is 3 feet too short is not a deal breaker. We will talk to you guys next week. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Check out Locked On NHL Game Night on the mornings after, breaking down every game every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned in June. Hunter and I will see you guys next week.